Hello, good morning, and welcome to today's morning bulletin. Myself and Emmet Gates here with you today to have a chat about Curtis Jones and what might come next for the midfielder. Emmet, the reason I wanted to kind of talk about it really is because fundamentally I'm a massive fan of his. I think he's got a huge amount of talent, a huge amount of potential, but he has been a little bit sort of in and out this season for Liverpool. That pattern likely to continue. I would have thought this week he was left out of the Carabao Cup winning squad, but probably will start against Norwich. It's been that kind of campaign for him. But what have you made of his season so far? How big a fan really of Curtis Jones are you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one to assess, isn't it? I mean, as you say, he's been in and out of the side all season, and I think he was just beginning to get a run together in like the late autumn, early winter, and then he suffered that eye injury, which kind of kept him out for better part of 2 months. And then since he's come back, he's kind of found it difficult. Again, he's been in and out of the side. And yeah, it's just been a really stop-start season for him. I'm a fan of Curtis Jones. I think he's hugely talented. But I think the discussion seems to be where is his best position, which is something that we've touched on a few times, on the website. And I think at this point, we still really don't know where his best position is. And I think that's kind of affecting his game time that he's receiving from Jurgen Klopp, because do you play him in midfield or do you play him on the left side of a front three? And then you've got all the returns, like of Thiago, Naby Keita, the signing of Luis Diaz. There's a lot of competition in the squad now, and inevitably someone has to get left out. And unfortunately, Curtis Jones had to be left out of the Carabao Cup squad on Sunday. So yeah, it's been a very mixed bag of a season, you would say, for Curtis Jones. But I am a fan of him, and there's definitely huge talent in there.
I think that's a really interesting thing about him, isn't it? We don't quite know where his best position is. I think it's fair to say that Jurgen Klopp seems to think that it's in midfield. That's the kind of transition that they're doing. The fact that they've signed Luis Diaz suggests to me now that we're not really going to see Curtis Jones much in the front three, if anything, between now and the end of the season, to be honest. There's just so many options there. Obviously, the usual players, Minamino, Origi as well, to add into that. So it does look like they're going to make him into a midfielder, but I think even that probably makes it quite hard to assess what he's about, how good he is, because it's not really a role that he's played. Certainly the kind of midfield role that he plays now is very different to the sort of free scoring, assisting, creative number 10 that he was for the under-23s that people maybe expect from him. The actual role as a number 8 for Jurgen Klopp is very, very different to that.
Yeah, and I mean, Liverpool really don't play with attacking midfielders in the sense that, that you would expect, say, if, Jurgen Klopp utilised a 4-2-3-1 and you had 3 attacking midfielders, like 3 number 10s almost behind a central striker. If Liverpool played that system, you could imagine Curtis Jones slotted in quite nicely. But the 3 midfielders for Liverpool are tasked with getting up and down and, putting in the defensive shift as well as, carrying the ball in transition. So it's a very different role from what he played for the under-23s. So you kind of think, will the midfield experiment with Jones work? Will he really adapt to the demands of the role? And I don't know, as of yet, I'd say the majority of us haven't been convinced. And obviously Jurgen Klopp hasn't been that convinced either, because he would have played him a lot more since the turn of the year. And I think it was at the beginning of this year, he not publicly scolded Jones, but he said you basically need to do better, essentially. And he's maybe started maybe 1 or 2 games since then, since basically Klopp came out and said that. I know he started in the win against Leeds, but I'm trying to think of another game that I know he started in the FA Cup games.
Yeah, there was a couple, I think, in a row. But it seems since those comments, he's either started or not been in the squad. There's not really been anything in between.
Yeah. So it's I don't know. At this point, we can't say if his shift to midfield has worked or is going to work. And especially with the competition that Liverpool have in midfield now, you know, will he get that many chances to impress? Is another question.
Yeah, the chances thing I'll come on to in a second, but just in terms of the kind of role that he plays, I mean, you mentioned there it's a hard role to kind of adapt to. It's a difficult thing in terms of you're being asked to do a lot of things. I think what Jurgen Klopp has tended to do a lot during his time at Liverpool is convert number 10s into kind of this more defensively astute player, if you like. So Gini Wijnaldum, the obvious example of someone who kind of probably naturally has the ability to go forward and create and be progressive. And certainly Curtis Jones can do that. We've certainly seen that. If you look at any kind of stats or numbers for him, his progression of the ball and his dribbling, his passing, whichever way you look at it, is very, very impressive. I think the difficulty with a Liverpool midfield role is that you have to do that. You have to be able to press. You have to be able to get up and down. You have to be able to put yourself in the right position. You have to be switched on all the time to intercept the ball. It's almost an impossible job. I think he's got probably individually, if you asked him to do one or two of those bits on their own, he can probably do them. It's more a case of, can he put them all together? Can he mesh them? And if he can mesh them, maybe then you become the perfect Liverpool midfielder. But I think watching him last week, I think it was against Leeds, wasn't it, where he started? And there was a couple of times early on where he seemed to just be holding on to the ball too much. I think that comes from just being overthinking and almost trying to work out methodically, this is what I've been told, this is what I need to do, this is where I need to be. If you kind of overthink it sometimes, it maybe looks a little bit worse than what it was. And I think you saw Virgil van Dijk having a go at him a couple of times. He seemed to be in the wrong position a couple of times. But I suppose that there is a chance that it might just click. It might just be that they're teaching him, they're slowly embedding it into his mind. And at some point before the end of this season, maybe we just see it click and suddenly we get this midfielder that Liverpool have kind of been working on for a few months. And certainly that's what I would hope and Liverpool fans would hope anyway. How realistic do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say, isn't it? You know, if he doesn't play, if Klopp doesn't really utilise him that much from here now until the end of the season, you know, as you're saying, it's almost like Klopp is breaking Jones down and remolding him in his image and taking all the stuff that made him such a success at under 23 level and basically discarding it and said, no, right, I want you to play like this way. You know, if you're playing on the left of midfield, this is what you have to do, A, B, C, D, E, F. And as you say, he's kind of overthinking it because obviously he's got instructions from Klopp of being told what to do and he's kind of going against his instinct. So whether he gets that many, you know, you can only retrain by experience, and by experience you have to play games. But if Klopp doesn't pick him or select him much from here on out, you kind of think, will he get the chance to actually evolve into this new role? And I mean, you consider Liverpool's midfield options now since, you know, Thiago's come back, Naby Keita's come back from AFCON. Jordan Henderson now has finally got a bit of rest and has come back into good form. You kind of think, how many chances is he going to get? He'll likely get the odd FA Cup game as Liverpool progress further, and he maybe get, you know, Champions League start, say, maybe against Inter in the second leg. Obviously, with Liverpool being 2-0 up, and there's not that need to put out the strongest 11. So you kind of think, how many more chances will he get from here on out? And that kind of leaves his future up in the air for me in terms of, you come to the summer, what do you do with him exactly? If you get to the end of the season and he hasn't really impressed, do you maybe consider a loan? You know, he's only 20. That's what people kind of forget as well. He's only 20 years old. You know, maybe a loan deal for a year could maybe do him the world of good, maybe. Or does he have another year kind of similar to this year? It's difficult to say at this point, isn't it?
I suppose it's hard to say as well because, I mean, let's be honest, the Liverpool midfield generally is not exactly injury averse, is it? It's not particularly sturdy at times. I mean, we've seen that obviously with Thiago last weekend. We've seen that with other players. I'm sure there'll be injuries. You don't want to sit here and try and predict how many injuries Liverpool are going to have before the end of this season. But it does feel to me a little bit like there will be a couple of chances. I think there will be maybe in the FA Cup, depending on draws, if Liverpool get through. There will be a couple of moments for him. But I suppose what you would say is it's a big time for him, isn't it? When he gets those chances, he's probably going to step up and start to try and take those.
Yeah, he needs to make the most of the game time he gets. I think it's imperative for his future that he does. And if he doesn't, then, we could be sitting here in 3-4 months again, having a bulletin about Jones's future and where it lies. But yeah, it's been a real stop-start. It's probably frustrating for him too, because it has been a real stop-and-go season. And he hasn't really got any rhythm in his game time. He's in for 1 or 2 games, out for 2 or 3, and players need rhythm at the end of the day. And so it's difficult then to just come back in for 1 game and impress when you're going to be out for the next 3 or 4.
Yeah, no, it'll certainly be interesting to see what happens with him for the rest of this season. I'm sure he will probably start against Norwich on Wednesday night as well. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do there as well. We'll have Jurgen Klopp's press conference for you a little bit later on today, early afternoon, I think, for that one. Plenty more build-up in the usual places too. But I think for now, that will do us. From myself, Matt Addison, and Emmet Gates. It's bye for now.